two-part series on acceptance, which is certainly a very important concept. I'm going to talk about where the original forms of acceptance in the Buddhist teachings, and then next week I'm going to talk more about present-day forms of acceptance as taught by modern Buddhists, such as Jack Kornfield, Tara Brach, John Kabat-Zinn, etc. So, and certainly the concepts and the practices associated with acceptance have changed a lot over the 2,500 years of Buddhist spiritual practice. So there's a lot to cover, but it's certainly an extremely worthwhile spiritual practice to keep in mind. And it's a valuable tool to help us, or it's a valuable set of tools to help us navigate through our lives without incurring more stress and suffering than necessary. And that's basically what all Buddhist practice boils down to. So, first of all, starting out with the word. Originally, the word acceptance, as I'm sure you know, pretty much had a couple of meanings. Accepting a package, accepting a piece of mail, and then there was accepting something as an article of faith or belief. Christians accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. So acceptance in that sense is affirming something that you believe is true. So it always had a couple of meanings. Even from the very beginning, it's been a sort of abstract word that has not been something that's easily or uniquely defined. Then it started taking on even more meanings. There's the social meaning of acceptance. For example, people who are handicapped seek social acceptance. People in the lesbian, gay, bi, transgendered communities all seek, understandably, social acceptance. There's acceptance in that sense means recognition, and a sense that everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and with respect, and should not be in any way treated with hostility or kept out of any opportunities. So that's social acceptance. And then there's finally, of course, psychological acceptance, which has grown and has found its way into a lot of different therapeutic techniques and schools of thought, all the way from cognitive behavioral therapy to acceptance-based therapy to dialectical behavioral therapy to even just traditional talk therapy now employs various forms of acceptance. And it's defined in most manuals as accepting or when an individual experiences a set of circumstances, often uncomfortable, unwanted, that the individual experiences without trying to change or escape, just tries to experience it without trying to run away, push it, or change it. Now, in that last definition of acceptance, simply experiencing something without trying to improve what we're experiencing is not really something that the Buddha taught. There's no word in the Buddha's language, the Pali language that he's recorded in, as being that kind of acceptance. There are, however, a bunch of words and concepts that he used that had a great deal of similarity with acceptance as in a more positive sense of change. not the acceptance that means resignation or defeatism, or I accept the fact that I lost that ping pong match. I accept the fact that that I can't pay the rent this week. Whatever. It's not that defeatist kind of acceptance. It's an acceptance that's very goal-seeking. That's a kind of acceptance that's based on, okay, I see that I might not be able to work with this set of circumstances, but that will free me up to work with another set of circumstances. It's about seeing which areas I can't be effective in right now and which areas I can, and acknowledging that. So it's different than the form of acceptance that we think of in terms of just resigning ourselves. It's a very goal-oriented, and I'm going to talk more about it. One of the foundations and the concepts that I'm going to be blowing out tonight is upekkha, or equanimity. And it's a word, upekkha, that has many different meanings in the Buddhist teachings. And it's a very, very powerful spiritual tool that helps us stay sane amidst our spiritual practice. Equanimity is sort of the spiritual watchdog, as it were, to keep us from going too far in any direction in our spiritual paths or in our endeavors, so far that we cause more stress for ourselves than not. I'm going to explain this in greater detail. If I'm sounding a little abstract, don't worry about it. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty. So there's basically at least 3 forms of equanimity that the Buddha referred to. And I'm going to start out with equanimity based on multiplicity, which is the lowest form of equanimity, but it's also the one that will come easiest, and you'll recognize. You'll find it is a form of balance or equanimity or inner acceptance that's practiced throughout not only Buddhism, but virtually all spiritual paths. It goes something like this. In all spiritual paths, there's this idea, rightly so, that all things must pass. All external conditions are changing. The good will be followed by the bad. I grew up with Eastern European parents. My mom was Jewish, and my dad became Buddhist. My mom was Jewish, and she always used to say, whenever you feel good or feel proud of something, she said, "Oh, just wait. It'll all be taken away." It was a very difficult environment to feel good about anything. But there's actually besides obviously the history of the Jewish people, but in terms of that, just as a observation, it's not unique in any way to Judaism. It's in all of the spiritual paths, and understanding that the good things that happen to us, it might be fame that we achieve, it might be praise that we achieve, it might be monetary gain that we achieve, it might be physical pleasures that we attain. All these external things are based on conditions that are changing. The things that allow us to get, for instance, praise at work depends on a lot of things. It depends on somebody seeing what we've done, liking what we've done, taking the time to tell us that they like what we've done, and generally it also requires that we've put a lot of effort into it. So there's a whole bunch of a whole bunch of conditions that have to be met. Sometimes in life we might do very well and nobody will notice it, or they might notice it and they might not take the time to acknowledge us. So in order to get praise, a lot of conditions have to be met. And those conditions are changing. People change their tastes and their opinions. Sometimes people come into work in a bad mood, and no matter how much effort you might put in, they might think that what you've done is shitty. So you can see that once you've attached to praise, you are also attaching to what? Blame. Blame will happen. Just as certainly the moment you you feel good about praise, you are also attaching a lot of stock and emotional attachment to when blame occurs. There's an old Buddhist teaching where you take a piece of paper and you split it in half. And the moment you split something in half, you create good and bad. You can't have good without having bad. You can't have left without having right. You can't have up without having down. You can't have praise without having blame. You cannot have monetary accumulation without having times when you feel poor. You cannot have fame without having times of loneliness. One gives birth to the other. The moment you attach to one, you're attaching to the other. So this form of multiplicity, equanimity, is acknowledging that conditions change, that external things always are going to be shifting, so that when you experience a sense of pleasure in life, it doesn't mean to stand apart like Spock and, just cast an eyebrow up and say, Kirk, why are you... No, it's a matter of... there was my inner geek coming out. But it's a matter of having an awareness in the back of your mind that no matter what you're experiencing, it's going to change. So remembering that just as certain as you're enjoying the praise right now, or you're suffering from the blame, that it will change. That the loneliness you're feeling will be followed by a sense of popularity at one point. That the feeling of worthlessness at your job will be replaced by a sense of, oh, I'm the best who's ever done this, or something of the sort. So it's a recognition that keeps us from throwing ourselves so far into this emotional roller coaster that we set ourselves up for a fall. Now, I understand that if there were no other forms of joy and happiness available, this would be a bummer, because people want to experience a lot of pleasure. And the way most people experience pleasure and happiness and a sense of esteem and a sense of security and a sense of pride is by attaching to their external world, their praise, their accumulation, their etc. So if that's all there was, then I'd have to tell you, you should just throw yourself into it, because there's nothing else. But that's not the truth. There is something else. So there is actually something that gives a sense of great inner peace, a great sense of security, a great sense of happiness that doesn't go away. So that's the reason why we can afford to have a little bit of a sense of like, okay, this is great. I'm enjoying this praise. I'm enjoying this job well done. I'm enjoying the fact that, I just met somebody who likes me or whatever. But I'm not going to climb inside it and want this feeling to last forever, because it won't. It won't. So long as you realize that you enjoy it, but you enjoy it as something that you know is going to come to an end, like you enjoy sunset. That you know that it's got only so long before it'll be replaced with other worries, other things that are on your mind. That's fine. Enjoy it. But keep that sense of acknowledgement, that sense of awareness as well. We do that through mindfulness as well. We keep a sense of the body, a sense of... it's a form of not allowing ourselves to get totally thrown about. So that's equanimity based on multiplicity. And that's the lowest form of equanimity, because it's present in virtually every single spiritual path. It's present in all folk wisdom. There's another saying that my mom used to say. What was it? The tall... Or maybe she said that people used to say in her family, the tall blade of grass gets cut off. So you shouldn't try to, which is funny, because she was a very accomplished woman, but she had all these sayings that were like, basically just made you want to hang your head down and, just hide. The second form of equanimity is based on spiritual practice with other people. There's something called the divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas, and they're basically the way the Buddha taught us to relate to other people spiritually. The first three are based on cultivating good, very positive states of interaction. The first is metta, or developing kindness, a sense of friendliness to all the people that you encounter until you're proven wrong. Just bringing the sense of openness and kindness and wishing well. And then when you see somebody who's suffering, bringing a sense of compassion, karuna. And then there's the sense of when somebody's doing really well, rather than getting envious or jealous, wishing that they suffered and had a big fall, there's appreciation, or mudita, which is allowing yourself to appreciate their happiness. So these are the first three of the divine abodes, and they're extremely positive mental attitudes to be in. They always give birth to, or generally give birth to, great lasting feelings of happiness. They're much better mental states to be in than the general sense of competitiveness, self-worry, fear, worrying about the future, comparing ourselves with others that we normally live in. So it's a very positive set of practices. But if we were only endlessly generous, compassionate, and appreciative people without any sense of balance, without any sense of boundaries or limitations, we'd be fucking nuts. All of us would be in a 12-step program. Not that we probably all are at one point in our lives, or heading there, or could be there, but or living in one. But anyway, we need to have something that keeps us in check, keeps us from becoming over-involved in trying to solve the suffering that's going on around us. We need to not be thrown by the fact that some people live incredibly unskillful lives based on greed and don't seem to suffer much from our, what we see, while other people live extremely generous, kind lives and seem to go through a tough time of it. For example, Stalin died of natural causes. Gandhi was shot. Go figure, right? It amazes me that Kissinger is still alive and living somewhere, and probably in a townhouse on the Upper East Side, surrounded, no doubt, by books and whatever. But the thing is that we actually cannot reach into their minds and know what kind of suffering, know what kind of confusion, know what they are living in. The Buddha taught something called karma, which is basically all of our actions catch up to us. The actions that you take, the thoughts that you think, the things that you say, the things that you do, they create the mind that you live in. So it might seem to us that certain people are rewarded for acting venally or acting poorly, but it's actually just a simplistic external thing that we are projecting. We can't reach into their mind and see what it is that they are actually experiencing. We don't know the confusion that they will experience as they go through the process of dying. We don't know what Henry Kissinger will experience on that day when he has to let go of all of his power, when nobody cares about anything he says, when even the far right wing stops returning his phone calls and he drifts into the netherworld of old age, where he has lost all the respect of the people around him. You can hear the expectation in my voice. We don't know what he's set himself up for. It's simplistic to simply think that that people are rewarded simply for acting poorly. We don't know how other beings are suffering. And the Buddha basically taught that as well. There are some people that we want to help. We want to ease their suffering, but their past actions have been so heading in the wrong direction that all of our efforts won't help. And if we literally try to expend the amount of energy that it would take to even restore them to a degree of sanity, we might, at the other hand, risk our entire inner tranquility. Now, again, equanimity, this form of acceptance, is not simply throwing up your hands and say, well, I tried to help my friend, but he's a fucked up mess, so I'm giving up and that's it. No, it's actually recognizing situations where we cannot be of any use, so that we can find situations where we can be of use, and B, only be of use to the extent that we don't drive ourselves crazy. So, for example, you've got friend A who's a mess, who's taking heroin, bottoming out. You've told them about where an NA meeting is, and then you might expend your efforts on friend B who's going through a breakup and just needs somebody to listen to them cry on the phone. But you don't listen to them for hours and hours until you feel like hanging yourself or throwing yourself out the window, or what peace and sense of tranquility has been thrown. You only extend yourself to the degree that you can without jeopardizing your own spiritual path. This is equanimity. It's basically the form of equanimity, the Brahmavihara equanimity that keeps us useful, helpful, engaged people, but people, on the other hand, that are not being pulled left and right by their friends, by the people they're trying to help. The moment that you don't have an inner spiritual, peaceful part of your life, the moment that it's being yanked left and right, means that the balance is off. It doesn't mean to stop helping. It means first to put more effort into your spiritual practice, to ease off as much as you can, and to be mindful that we want to keep our body and our minds as stress-free as we can. So that's the second form. And it's again based on being self-aware of where we can be useful and being as useful as we can. The third form of equanimity, and the last that I'll talk about tonight, is equanimity based on meditation practice and our inner practice. This form of equanimity is based on sometimes when we sit down and we start to meditate, there are parts of the meditation that just will not go the way we fucking want them to. Believe me. There are times when I sit with my relaxing the body and there's just parts of the body that will not relax. There are times when I try to get a good breath going and I can't get one. The breath just feels uncomfortable. There are times when I try to work with replacing thoughts, and no matter how much I replace the obsessive thought, it keeps going back to this obsessive thought. So part of this form of equanimity is being reasonable, is seeing when a certain part of our spiritual practice that evening is a lost cause, and moving on to a practice that has some chance of working. It means simply accepting, okay, tonight the breath is just not happening. I'm fucking falling asleep here. Every time I think of the breath, I am falling asleep. I am not getting anywhere, so okay, I am going to switch my meditation over to practicing thoughts of loving kindness, or developing reflections on times that I've acted skillfully, reflecting on times that I've acted virtuously, reflecting on times that people have shown up for me. All these kinds of thoughts sometimes work when the body is too uncomfortable, too stressed out, or the breath is too labored or just doesn't feel good. So that's part of it. But another part of spiritual equanimity when it comes to our inner practice is also It goes down to that old saying, having no preferences. And this is something that Ajahn Jeff emphasizes a lot. Basically, there are a lot of times when the things that feel good, that we like to do in our spiritual practice, they might be fine, but they're not getting us over the hump. And the things that we don't like to do are the things that we need to do to get any sense of progression in our lives. I'll give you an example. In America, we have amazing meditators. People sit, and I've heard monks from other countries say that they come to America and they're astonished by how many people here can sit and can actually attain pretty good meditations. But they all say that when it comes to acting from generosity or appreciating the successes of our friends, these are areas. Most of us would like the idea of going on a retreat. Oh, it's great! I went to hear Noah. He was at a beautiful place. I was there for 10 days. It was wonderful. We eat vegan food, and then I came back. How fucking best! Well, because in the rest of your life, you're not practicing virtue, or you might not be working on mindfulness, relaxing your body while you're at work, or you might not be practicing forms of generosity or volunteer work, whatever. There's other things always to work on other than the one thing that we like the most. It's like in exercising. If you exercise, there's always one exercise that you like the most. Oh, I'm really good at these jumping jacks. But, touching my toes is awful, so I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to... Look how lame I am when it comes to this kind of stuff. But you get the idea. There's things that we like, and there's things that we don't like. And if we only do the things that we like, we're going to wind up with a body that's going to have one huge muscle. And you ever see those bike racers? They got a weird, huge, legs, and then they're really tiny at the top. We wind up like that spiritually. And that's not what we want. We want to have a balanced spiritual practice. So we put effort and energy not just into the things that we prefer, but also into the parts that we find difficult and challenging. And that's equanimity again, because it boils down to seeing which areas are working, which areas are not working, and putting our efforts into the most effective area without at the same time driving ourselves crazy. So, that's the first talk on acceptance, the 3 forms of equanimity. I hope it brought a little bit of interest, and now's your turn to ask any questions or make any comments, offer any debate topics, or hurl invectives. Thank you for listening.
I actually have a question about progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like a lot of people, I'm trying to develop my own practice at home. And I hear a lot of talk about progress. People, being like, hey, I made a lot of progress today, etc. Whatever. But I don't really have a sense of any kind of, it's obvious to me what the end goal is.
Right.
But I don't really have any sense of like how to quantify, how am I doing? How am I progressing? Whatever. It's not like, you can take a reading, like measure your heart rate or something, I'm this in life or whatever. So I'm wondering if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Just from, before I go to the spiritual perspective, for a long time there was no clinical tests on happiness and emotional well-being. And then they developed one, the baseline happiness test. And here, let me turn this off because we don't.